Good evening. We'll call to order this study session, February 28, 2013, at 6:05. Roll call, please.
Esri, Harper, Hartkey, James, Jay, Kibler, Langenheim, Maxwell, McGuire, Michaels, Mitchell, Petrie, Quisenberry, Richards, Rosales,
Here.
Schrader, Schwartz, Alex, Berkson, Carter, Coert, Kurtz.
Here. All right, great. We have a quorum. I'd like a motion for approval of the agenda, please. So moved by James, second by Mr. Rosales. Any changes or discussion on the agenda? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. There doesn't seem to be any public participation since there's no public. We have just one gentleman from the press with us tonight. So we'll move on past public participation and head right into the publicizing food establishment inspection reports and recommendations for update to the Champaign County Public Health Ordinance. We have Mr. Jim Roberts from said organization. And Jim, what we'd like to do is have you lay out the program for us, please. The county board members will raise their hands if they have a question during your presentation. And I would appreciate it if you would respond to them after I recognize them. Okay? Jim, please hit your button on the front of your microphone right in the center, and that'll turn red.
All right. Okay, well, good evening. And yes, it was Stan James' idea that I be here, although I don't mind being here because you're going to have input into this as well. Let me just start off by saying, Jim Roberts, the MS stands for Master's of Science degree, but I have LEHP there, and you might be wondering what that means. What that means is that I'm a licensed environmental health practitioner in the state of Illinois. So I'm licensed by the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation to do professional activities in the environmental health field. And so that would be doing inspections, interpretation of codes, doing consultations, and do educations like in the fields of milk, food, private sewage, private water supplies, and some other programs as well. So that's what the LEHP means. We follow program standards, and one of the program standards for an approved health department with environmental health fields is they have at least one person who is one person who is an LEHP to supervise the other people in the office, and so that would be myself, but also the CUPHD with whom you have an intergovernmental contract requires in their job description that within 3 years of hire that everyone be an LEHP. One of the advantages of that is if they are not LEHPs, then LEHPs have to review all the work of every individual inspection done by those other non-LEHPs, and so that can be quite time-consuming. But there are other advantages as well, but that's one of them. I should also tell you that I've been with the health district for almost 31 years now. And so I started out as Associate Environmental Health Inspector. That was the bottom rung. And I moved up to Environmental Health Inspector, Sanitarian 1, Sanitarian 2. Those job duties of Sanitarian 2 involves the work in constructing and remodeling a new food establishment, for example. Then I was the program coordinator in charge of the food program, and I've been Director of Environmental Health since July of 2007. And what I'm going to show you tonight is, Stan wanted a PowerPoint presentation, but my administrator, Julie Pride, came across a Prezi presentation. So this is a Prezi presentation, and this is and I don't understand it all. It's a cloud-based presentation software and storytelling tool for exploring and sharing ideas on a virtual canvas. Prezi is distinguished by its zooming user interface, ZUI, which enables users to zoom in and out of their presentation media. And so when you see things move in and out, that's part of the Prezi, I guess, okay? There's And I think when they zoom in and out quite a bit, they do too, so I'll try to keep that to a minimum. But, so Julie said try this, so that's the reason I'm trying it. And then also, too, I felt that I probably should disclose that I do know some people professionally and personally. And so I know Al Kurtz because I have a vague recollection of doing an inspection in Blimpies a long time ago. I can see you and your wife in there, and that's about all I remember. Jeff Keebler, who I see is not here, has made recent inquiries about plan review process because he has some family members interested in opening a retail food establishment, which we do regulate. And then, of course, I know Stan James from being the board liaison between the County Health Board and the County Board. And then on a personal note, I know Gary Maxwell. Gary's my neighbor. He lives 2 doors away from me, so I just want to make sure. And then probably I heard you talking about the Pink House, so maybe we ran into each other and I don't recollect.
It was a very short time that I was there, but
Yeah, it may not have been me either, you know. So,
I got a better job.
and so all of you have, and I affected all your lives every day because every one of us eats the food and drinks the water, perhaps in a private setting every day. So environmental health touches your life every day. There's that zoom in feature. Little background, the local health departments are responsible for permitting and regulating and inspecting retail food establishments. So we do not do any wholesale type of manufacturing or food processors. That is handled intra-state by the Illinois Department of Public Health, and then interstate commerce is handled by the FDA. So, for example, like at Kraft, there's an FDA inspector there. We do retail food establishments, and there's different types. Everyone thinks they're restaurants, but they are restaurants. Whether they're sit-down restaurants or fast food restaurants or buffet-style restaurants. But we also do daycare centers. We do institutions such as the county nursing home, the jail. We do the production kitchens in schools. We do the satellite kitchens of schools. We do mobile food units. We do concession stands, food pantries, really any place that you can buy food that you can eat on the spot or take home, like in a grocery store situation, and prepare yourself. We do the grocery stores too, whether they're large grocery stores or just small grocery stores. I wanted to show you that we also do not do any retail food establishments owned and operated by the University of Illinois, and we don't do cottage food operations, and those are recent species where individual operators can produce non-potentially hazardous baked goods from their home kitchens and sell them at farmers markets only. And so here's the breakdown of those facilities that are in the CUPHD, which is the Public Health District, and the district is formed on township-based form of government. It's the City of Champaign Township as well as Cunningham Township. The County Health Department is outside those 2 township boundaries. And so the CUPHD, we have about 764 establishments that we regulate, and with the county public health department jurisdiction, we have 311, so just about a little under 1,100 establishments. When we do these food program, doing the inspections and everything else, we follow the Illinois Department of Public Health food program standards, and those are available on the CUPHD website. You can find all of those there. But one of the standards, in addition to having LEHPs, is to categorize each one of these food establishments by foodborne illness risk potential. And they have criteria that they list out. And there are 3 categories that they have, and those are the 3 categories that we use. Those 3 categories are high risk, medium risk, and low risk. High risk would be based on certain food operations like cooling large volumes of food or preparing food in advance of service, like for 12 hours, or may even be the population that's served. So even though you may have a simple operation, for example, at the nursing home, because of the population served, we call them highly susceptible individuals, they're always going to be a Category 1 establishment. Category 2 establishment is more like your cold prep sandwich places or your cook and serve type places, more fast foodish. And then a Category 3 establishment is like some of our grocery stores, maybe our gas stations, like an Aldi food store, for example. And so this classification causes different frequency of inspections each year. A Category 1 establishment should be inspected at least 3 times a year, although they do allow us in the program standards to inspect them 2 times a year if we have an alternative education or they have certified managers the whole time. See, I had a thought on that too. Category 1, and then Category 2, the minimum is of 1 routine inspection a year, and Category 3 is a minimum of 1 routine inspection every 2 years. I know what my thought was, is that these inspections are unannounced inspections, so they're surprise inspections. And then in Champaign County, this is again outside the CUPHD, as of January 2013, you had 311 retail food establishments, or about 28.9% of the total that I'm responsible for. 75 of those are in Category 1, as you can see, 170 in Category 2 and 66 in Category 3. Those are the type of facilities, but then the inspections in 2012, you can see that we did 1,627 routine inspections, and that's the breakdown with the district and the county. And then also we do re-inspections, the breakdown of the district and the county. I was wondering why you're all looking that way. A little background on retail food establishments that we're responsible for. Yes.
Patsy.
Thank you. Just a clarification, 2 clarification questions. You mentioned that Kraft has their own inspectors. Is that somebody that's on site all the time, or they float in and out? And then the second one is, how are things inspected at the university, since that isn't within your domain?
I have never met the person at Kraft, but I would think that they'd be there the whole time. Meat and poultry inspection is a little bit different. They have to have, and this is regulated by the Illinois Department of Agriculture, again, intrastate or interstate would be the USDA. Those inspectors have to be present when the animals are slaughtered or processed. And so you might have a place that maybe processes 2 times a week, and so the inspector needs to be present at those times in those ag type of facilities. At the university, the local health agency, as well as the Illinois Department of Public Health, does not do regulatory inspections for those university food services.
So who does?
I don't know. About 5 years ago, I had a counterpart, and she retired, and she used to do inspections. I wouldn't call them regulatory inspections. They were consultations by appointment.
So is our takeaway we shouldn't need it?
I'll let you make your own judgment. But yes, there's no regulatory inspections taking place. Publicizing inspection reports. These inspection reports are public records, and I want to emphasize that disclosure is not an issue. I have plenty of requests for inspections, and I know that, there's no problem with disclosing this information. The question is, how do you disclose it? And it's my feeling, too, that consumers, and I always think about citizens and visitors because I have a window, luckily, at my office. I get to see all the traffic going past I-74 all the time. So there's visitors to our community all the time. So these consumers should know about what we do, and they need to know if it's important to them to make that dining decision. Publicizing inspection reports is not mandated by law, by the General Assembly. It is not mandated by the Illinois Department of Public Health Food Program Standards. And it is not mandated by any FDA law, or it's not by any FDA model food code recommendations. But it could be mandated by yourselves as local agencies. And so that is what we're exploring with this, is that the CUPHD board has the ability to make ordinances. They would have to ordain it, as well as the Champaign County board yourselves would have to ordain it through the Champaign County Public Health Department. And one of my goals, if we're going to disclose, is that I would like uniformity across all our jurisdictions. One of the things that I strive for, and I hear about all the time, is about consistency and fairness. And so by treating people equally and trying to create uniformity across our jurisdictions, I think that would be a plus, and that would be to everyone's advantage, and I wouldn't hear about it either. So, with that in mind, we had a joint study session of the CUPHD Board and the Champaign County Public Health Department Board in September of 2012. Since we do have visitors and the university does have retail food establishments, I invited the university representative to attend, and she did. And at that time, we discussed 6 options for posting on site. And so one of your handouts was this attachment, this review article. And I like the article because it gives kind of an overview of all the different schemes that are out there. But also I use that to highlight certain things like reduces level of risk, simplified inspection results, color-coded, simple to understand. You know, so I emphasize the words that were in this document to make sure that when I was proposing something that you saw it. Yeah, it's this was one of your attachments. There's 2 attachments, I believe. This was a review article, a published review article in the Journal of Food Science, Food Service. Correct. Anyway, my purpose was to give you, try to give you an overview that someone had published about all the different schemes that are out there. And then also, I used it for myself, again, to emphasize certain words to see that if I was going to propose something, that I was trying to meet what other people thought were important. And so some of those things were to be easy to understand, have meaningful information, things that would impact consumer health, and things that would grab attention, you know, color-coded compliance status, for example. And so part of the basis for this is using the FDA Model Food Code 2005 Food Establishment Inspection Report. Let me give you a little history on this. The FDA does not have law associated with this, but what they do is create a model food code. And today we're still using what would be called the Model Food Code from 1976. However, they've made changes along the way, and now what they do is they make changes in the Model Food Code every 4 years. So it was 2005, 2009, and we expect 2013 in the fall of this year. But in 2005, they proposed a new food establishment inspection report, and that was this. I don't have the pages numbered, but it was this document here, and it's different than the form that we use today. But what it does is emphasizes talking about foodborne illness risk factors and public health interventions, and differentiates that between good retail practices. And also, too, Sacramento County, California was kind of an inspiration to myself, and I think to the board members, too, to see what could be done. And so we use those 2 things as a model.
Of this food establishment inspection report, can you talk to us about the science behind the development of this report, and so we have some feeling about the reliability and the validity of the categories and the points?
Well, I can. I can tell you what isn't, and that is the food inspection report that we use today from 1976, and I'll pass this along. The code that we are still using today, it's on page 88 here. What they did is, that was the first attempt to electronically deal with the inspection reports, and so they were trying to fit all this information on the 80 columns of an 80-column IBM card back in 1976. And so they had 44 columns associated with the food protection program, and someone somewhere said that this should go here, this should go there, and that's how that happened in 1976. In the early 90s, the FDA was challenged by Congress to be science-based. And so anything that comes out of the FDA nowadays has got science-based basis to it. What exactly that was, I don't know, but I will show you in maybe the next circle about consumer health, what they feel the big things are, okay?
Okay, and the new Food Safety Act that was recently passed, how is that going to impinge on this? Because I know the rules and regulations they haven't finished writing the rules and
Yeah.
regulations.
I don't understand how the Food Safety Modernization Act is going to impact the FDA with respect to retail food service, retail food establishments.
Okay.
I don't know. I think they're going down the path to use this FDA report as they go.
All right,
So let me pass this so you can see what it was like in 1976.
thanks.
This is one of my goals, is to modernize our inspection program to get to that point. And so, Patsy, you asked what were the realizations behind, or what's the science base behind creating that form? Well, what FDA said is that they looked at the information from CDC, and they gathered that there were 5 major risk factors that contribute or cause foodborne illness. And they listed those items there, and that's in the top part of that inspection report there, too. And then they also found out that there were 5 key public health interventions that they have in the FDA Model Food Code. So these are the 10 big things that they want to emphasize, and that's why they put those at the top of that inspection report that's different from 1976. And I put the red flag there because people always say, you know, what are the red flags? Well, these things, if there are violations in these areas, to the health inspector are red flags. These are the things that tell us to go, yikes, we have a problem. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Now, before we were going to post the inspection information, currently we have now, we have a health permit, and I had this handout here to show you what your health permit looks like today. It's a half a sheet of paper, and on the back side we have information regarding a boil order. In case we have a boil order, we refer the operator to that. But the health permit needed, there was some comment during our discussions about a health permit being bigger and to be changed, and so that's where we're going. That's at least the district report. For the district, I have to include space for the 2 seals, because I may need that. So the health permit for the county probably would change as well. And I skipped over the handout regarding the 6 options that were discussed from the Board of Health. These were the minutes from the joint session, and if you want to talk about those in more detail, I'd be glad to. But what they ended up doing is the Boards of Health agreed that to choose the option number 5, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Of course, this was, you know, this is always a draft version, and I have a more updated version that I'll hand out. But there were 3 color-coded compliance statuses that we thought would work. One was green, you know, green means go. Yellow, caution, and red for closure. And so the green one is here, and it's in your packet as well. And you can see there's some corrections on there. But the object was colored, so it could grab attention. It also communicated compliance status. Green means go. And when I was talking with restaurant operators, how they felt about this initially, for them, they were thinking that as long as they could see someplace that was green, they were going in. So it says compliance status, you know, like pass-fail almost. It gives you choice because it gives you all the information you need to know. Again, green means go. Or if you want more information, you can start to look at some of the specifics, and these are the specifics associated with foodborne illness risk factors and those public health interventions. And then also, too, by putting those on this compliance notice that would be posted at the front door, for example, this would provide not only consumer information, but to me, provide incentive for a food service operator to say, hey, I don't want any problem with my employees not having soap to wash their hands. I want to make sure every day that I have soap available so that they can wash their hands to avoid having a mark associated with allowing hand contamination. So that's the green one. The yellow one would, again, color-coded but convey compliance status that a reinspection was required. Boards of health choose enforcement benchmarks, and we still use SCORE, but if you fall below a certain score, then a reinspection is required. And so the boards of health have that in their enforcement section and ordinances. And then the third one would be read to keep, for indicating closure. And in your packet, I included two copies of letters recently sent to county facilities that I'm having a hard time getting into compliance. One of which has changed ownership and has refused to get a permit so they can operate in their own name. And the other one has failed to renew their application. And so they are currently operating without us collecting the fee or without being in good standing. So the object would be is if we could post this on the outside of that establishment, I would think that would be operator incentive to change. Right now, what I have to do is I have to go through the state's attorney's office, which we have done, but it is a long, complicated process.
Well, I think you sort of answered my question. I guess I don't understand why you don't have the authority, if they haven't paid their fee or whatever, that you just simply can't close them down.
When the Health Department came in existence back in 1990, when it was voted in 1996, and when we started going in 1998, the powers were limited by the Board of Health to follow certain procedures.
Well, I was just going to say, Jim, due to the discussions and stuff we had, that this is going to be in part, if, once we present it to the county board, there's also going to have to be some ordinance changes, because he still needs some teeth to be able to enforce this type of program. Right now, he has no teeth. It's like a lot of the things that we have with zoning or other things, you have no fine system, no anything, or recourse, other than if they're not paying their fee on time, then he has to go through the state's attorney and the courts.
We charge a late fee of $25, and then I have to go through that process, right?
Right.
Just a question about what's the difference between general compliance and in compliance?
Well-
On the green sheet.
Oh, yeah, that's an evolution of terms. It started out with in good standing to in compliance, but talking with restaurant operators, they didn't feel that why, if I have some demerits or marks on the front there and I'm in compliance, the two doesn't make sense. And so the idea was to maybe say they're in general compliance. I mean, they're in general compliance with minimum standards, but they still may have had deficiencies in their inspection.
So are we going to have two green forms, or are you going to literally cross it and write general compliance?
I have an
Shows-
updated version
Oh,
6,
so
that
it's
I'm going
not
to
gonna
pass
look like
out
that.
next, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I had a brief question. Those individuals that are operating under somebody else's name, are they family related, or they're just totally sell a business to another owner and they have not taken out a license to operate, or how is?
Right, it's a change of ownership where one owner was completely different than the other owner.
But doesn't, upon the termination of that contract or sell of contract, doesn't that new owner have to come in and
Oh,
take
yeah.
a permit?
Permits are not transferable from one owner to the next or from one location to the next. But if they choose to ignore the health department, they're continuing to operate until I can get some help.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. They still have inspection though on the restaurant.
I've never had a place go that far out, but the answer would be, no, I don't think I can, because I don't have access. I don't have jurisdiction, legal access to go into a place. I don't have a legal permit.
What?
But now this is the county now, okay? In this district, I have the help of both cities. Remember those city stickers? We have a joint city license health permit. And so if they don't pay the health permit or the city license, vice versa, we cooperate with each other, and the city will enforce closure, and I can ask them to do so, and they'll send a police officer out.
What, it's kind of funny, 20 years ago, I'd taken their whole class at Parkland. And I think that was 1990, somewhere. But anyway, I'd taken the whole class, and I missed one night. And that was the night we had the forum for the speakers that was running for the county board. And I went back, and she wouldn't let me take the test. So I had to choose between, missing that night or doing the county board speech that night, so I went to the county board speech. And that was at Parkland. And during that time, they was, coming out and inspecting restaurants.
What place was that?
Huh?
What 20 years ago?
Yeah.
We had, the district was in existence, and we would do the retail food establishments within the district boundaries, but
Right.
not the county boundaries.
Because we had, like barbecue pits and, cooking for churches and things, and they would, you had to go down and get your permit. And
Right,
then-
probably a temporary permit at the time, because we have temporary permits as well.
Yeah, we had to have the disinfect system
Yeah.
right on the spot and all of that good stuff.
Yep, so I may have run into you in the past, too.
I have a question. Two folds. One fold is, what is the size of your staff to do inspections?
I have myself, the Director of Environmental Health, and then I have two program coordinators, one of which coordinates the food program, the other one does the non-food programs, water, sewage, mosquito surveillance. And then I have 7 individuals. One individual is a plan reviewer. She does the bulk of the work associated with new construction remodeling. My food program coordinator does about 75% of her time doing that as well, and about 50% of her time doing the coordination. So she works more than 100%. And then the other individuals are involved in doing the routine inspections of the water program, sewage program, and the food program.
Now, and the second part is, when I was on city council in Champaign, there was an issue on enforcement, and it was an issue surrounding the smoking ordinance, that who was going to enforce that? The local police department didn't want to do the enforcement aspect, and I think it was left to pretty much the public health to come in and fine those individuals that allowed smoking within those establishments. Is that your office that does that?
It is the district that does do that, but the people who do that is in the smoking cessation program, which is in the Division of Health Promotion and Wellness. I'm in environmental health,
Environmental health.
so
Which is not under your office, right?
the smoking part is not under my office.
I see, okay.
However, I do have on our inspection form, there were 3 criteria, I don't remember exactly what they were, but there were 3 criteria regarding the smoking ordinance. And so if my inspectors go in and find ashtrays, for example, or evidence of smoking, they'll check that, and then that's recorded, and then once a month I review the reports, and I can generate a report, and I send it to Health Promotion and Wellness for investigation and enforcement. So my staff is out there looking, but we don't do any investigation or enforcement.
I see, okay, thank you.
Okay. Don't you still have to, say for instance, you're gonna open up a restaurant? Don't you have to go to the, food handling?
Right, what you're talking about,
And get your permit?
are you talking about food service sanitation
Yeah.
management certification? Right. In those different categories, Category 1, we require someone who's certified at all times food is being prepared. So say you were opening at 10 o'clock in the morning, but you got there at 8 o'clock to prepare food, you'd need someone who's certified at that time at all times. Category 2 establishment, you need at least 1 individual who is certified. Category 3 requires none.
That used to be down there on, North Neal, right across the track.
Right, we were at 710 North Neal, we moved to Randolph, and now we're on Kenyon Road at the old Caldwell.
I think I remember you now.
Okay, I'm glad you're smiling.
Yeah.
Let's see, where was I? So regarding posting on-site inspection notice, just like what Stan was saying, in your packet, I have some draft posting requirements. There was 2 pages. They talked about inspection notice placards, posting inspection notice placards, what they were and how they would be done. And so that was in your packet of information here too. So that is what we would be forwarding to the attorneys, both of the district and to the state's attorney, to make sure that we have uniformity and we're doing everything that we're supposed to correctly. But as Stan was saying in there, I mean, you could go into a food establishment tonight and you could look for those health permits that are supposed to be prominently and conspicuously posted even under your own health ordinance and try to find them. And same thing is that you have this choke-saving poster. We can't call it the Heimlich maneuver because that requires royalties, but you could have this choke poster. This is supposed to be posted in food establishments as well, and this is a part of life and safety. We issue them, but try finding them, because there's no enforcement teeth or consequences associated with not doing this. So that's why in the proposed information that would go to the state's attorney and the district attorney, we need to have, spell out what the enforcement part would be and then have consequences associated with that. I'll give you an example. Sacramento County, which part of this is based on, their first time that they, in there is two, if someone happens to take one or they lose one, first one is no charge the first time around in a year. But Sacramento County found out that their charge is $250 for the first one, $500 for the second one. Illinois Department of Ag, if you run afoul of them for not having an inspector on site when meat was being processed, for example, the first time is a warning letter, second time is $500, third time is $1,000. So in some of these other agencies, they mean business when they want things to be taken care of. And I think that would be one of the recommendations that I would give to those attorneys as well.
I have a question. During the reinspection stage, which is the yellow sign that you put up, are they allowed to continue to stay in operation?
Yes, yes.
They are.
So
That's
we,
posted visibly in the entrance as you walk in, as patrons walk in, they could see this
Oh, yeah.
lighted yellow.
yeah. And that's one of the questions I would have for yourselves is how long should we have that posted? For example, now, I'll tell you what we do now, is that, we go and do our routine inspection, and they fall below this enforcement score benchmark, for example. Those things that impact consumer health, we're required to have it corrected on site. So that's why you will see COS, things are corrected on site. But what we do is we give them notification, and what we do today is we give them about 30 days in order for us to do an unannounced reinspection. 30 days seemed like a time limit to allow people to give adequate amount of time to take care of the problem. It's not a program standard, it's not an ordinance. I mean, we could change that. One of the things I don't want to do, though, is I just did an inspection of your facility. We corrected a lot of things on site. If we were to rescore it, it would be okay, but, we didn't have this unannounced reinspection to see if behaviors had changed. If you made effort to change your behaviors on temperatures of food, for example. And so one of the questions that I struggle with is how long should we give someone an ample opportunity to have time to correct? I don't want to go back, with an hour. They say, I've taken care of everything because you already said it was COS. Come back and give me a green one. So there's got to be some place in between. And I was even thinking, too, maybe the first time, I have repeat people, they're on a roller coaster, for example, I was thinking maybe the first time we do a reinspection, we give them the 30 days. Maybe the next time we give them 2 weeks, next time a week, and you have progressive re-inspections, But I don't know how to solve that problem, but I would look for guidance, on how to maybe handle that. And I like unannounced re-inspections too, because we used to do announced re-inspections. I'm coming back tomorrow at 10 a.m. All the food people were out of the kitchen. They're all sitting, waiting, everything's put away. Yeah, I mean, some places would stay closed until we got there. So announced re-inspections, they have some value sometimes because if we have to do something in particular, but unannounced re-inspections have been the goal.
And regarding liability and risk management, if somebody gets sick when one of these signs are up at their establishment, how much risk or are we liable for suit if that occurs, if an individual dies or gets sick on salmonella, for instance? Are you, the county, is liable for it, or just the establishment?
Not a lawyer, so I don't know. All I know is that, all I know is every day, whether you're green or yellow, there are food safety hazards that need to be managed every day. And so even if I do an inspection today, we saw those things. Those are what we're responsible for. The conditions tomorrow could be vastly different. The conditions yesterday could have been vastly different as well. But when we do our inspection and we find something out of temperature, for example, we will write it up, but we will also correct the problem before we leave. So on that day, at that time, we're taking care of those hazards.
Because I would imagine it's just like you had indicated, it's either you pass or you fail. There is no in between. Either you open up for business or you close because it doesn't pass any inspection.
Well, and that is, I don't know, option number one, if you looked at the options, the traditional model is that people would say, as long as you had a permit, you must be in good standing to be open today. And if you weren't, we would suspend the permit and close the facility.
Jim, let me jump in here. I was in business, in the restaurant business for 11 years, and a couple of things came to mind as we have discussed previously concerning how long someone should be out of compliance or in compliance, and how long we should put these flyers up in their restaurants. First thing I want to say, we need a balance. We don't want to put these people out of business because they're out of compliance on a given day, because things change in a restaurant all the time. As you told me, Fazoli's had a problem recently, tonight. They'll fix it, it'll be taken care of, but if we stick up a poster for 30 days saying that they were out of compliance, they could lose a lot of business. That's why it's important to me to see this as a balance between, you can't just say, Geraldo, that there's a line. The line is, if you go below a certain number, you're closed. But if you go above that, they give you a shot at making sure that you become in compliance with it, so that that business can stay viable. Is very important, because if you put up a red sign on somebody's door and they comply, and now it's up there for 30 days, you're out of business. You might as well close that place. So I'll give it to you in a second. So Jim and I were discussing time of length, and it's an iffy proposition, because we don't want to put these people out of business, but we also want to make sure that their restaurant is compliant with the inspector and their reports. So it's a difficult balancing act when it comes to how we're going to treat each individual restaurant. Now, there could be a record of problems, and we may need to take more serious action against some restaurants that are constantly in and out of compliance. So there are gray areas here that we really need to look at before we jump in and make a line in the sand when it comes to 1,100 businesses that we have here that we're inspecting. Go ahead, Geraldo. Okay, yeah, Stan and then Josh.
Well, but a lot of this was discussed at the committees, and it was really in-depth, and we've been looking at this for quite some time, and Jim went to some training in Indianapolis and all that. You're right, but we also got to be mindful that he has limited staff. So when we're posting signs and that, I would hope that if it's a red sign, that his staff would make a note that probably within a 5-day or 7-day week, they could turn it over, because there's new restaurants coming on board that have called me, and I've talked to Jim about this, that can't get a timely inspection because it's first come, first served, which is fair. And then you have staff that's sick, and you have county board members that don't make meetings. So what I'm trying to say is, you have to be fair about it, but sometimes we read more into the detail than is what is needed, because just like a yellow sign to me, if you, gas company tags some of the stuff I work with all the time, all that is a warning, and it means it needs to be corrected. Then they'll come back and check it, and 30 days is more than fine with me and more than ample for most businesses. But the red sign, I would say probably at least no more than 7 days, but we got to ensure that he has the staff. You don't want to overburden the people doing the work. So that's one thing we looked at. Right now, we have nothing. I mean, you're lucky to even see the health permit in some places. So when we're asking a lot of these questions, I sometimes think, well, we haven't been concerned up till now, and these are all hypothetical, but it's like all of a sudden it's got everybody's interest because we're face-to-face and talking about it. But just take a breath is what I always tell everybody. Listen to the whole spiel, as I like to say, and we'll get to some of that. But asking a lot of questions, we're asking them, and he's getting to them.
Well, I think some of the urgency, or at least priority changes, is we've had some incidences locally. Salmonella cases, E. coli cases. We've had some incidences, like Jimmy John's had that problem recently. And I think that's becoming more of a mindset for us as cutbacks are taking place on a federal level, where food aren't being inspected as much when they get into our local restaurants, and we're all stressed for resources, that these things can take place. That's why I think this has boiled to the top recently. Josh, go ahead.
Kind of more nuts and bolts oriented. In my mind, perhaps you should think of this in the opposite direction of what you're talking about. If people would get a yellow sign, the first time, be back within 7 days. Because on a first violation, I would think it would behoove you to get that business back to green as soon as possible. Because I don't know about you guys sitting around this table, but I see a place with a yellow sign, I don't care if it's my favorite restaurant, I'm not going in there.
Ever.
Yellow sign, I don't care. Even a green one with a couple of violations, I'd have questions. But, so like, for example, the first time, within 7 days, it's re-inspected. If it's another multiple violation, so basically finding people for multiple violations. If they clear that up, then they get a second violation, then they have to have yellow for 2 weeks. Or, you know, it's more of a part of the penalty for repeated violations is having to wear that sign in front of your business. Just an idea maybe to look at, rather than the first time, you know, within 30 days. I agree with Mr. Kurtz, 30 days of a yellow sign on a restaurant, that's gonna knock it out of business.
What we do now is if you have a reinspection required, and we go back and do an unannounced reinspection and they fail again, then they have their permit suspended. And so if I give them 7 days and I do another reinspection, maybe they haven't had enough time to fix whatever they needed to fix or change. And so I could run into that issue as well.
Yeah, I see how that can go both directions. We know when you're talking equipment failures, things that are gonna, but when you're talking temperatures, when you're talking storage, cleanliness, things like that, that should be changed within 48 hours in a restaurant that is a serious restaurant that wants to do business in this county. And, you know, if it's, and we could perhaps have it staged in a way that if it's an equipment violation that's, you know, you gotta get a new cooler and it's gonna be 30 days, then we can, you know, have a special case situation. But to me, it behooves both us and the business to clean these up as quick as possible. And to have businesses that have a one-time violation not wear basically a scarlet letter for the next 30 days, depending on the convenience of who can get out there to inspect them in time. And I'm not criticizing your staff at all on that. I know we're all limited by budgets and things, but then those that do repeatedly offend, then we can hit them harder. So, and again, these are just suggestions for, yes.
Getting parameters set up for this ordinance that we hope to put in place and indeed follow through. Each of these ideas are excellent, but we need to find a balance between.
Oh, I turned it off, didn't I? Thank you, please. But we need to have parameters so that we can balance this when it comes due, and we set an ordinance. All of these ideas are excellent, but we need to work at that. That's why we have this session. Geraldo, then Patsy. Go ahead. Well, Lloyd has spoken first, and Patsy has, and Geraldo has, so it's just next hand up. Go ahead, Geraldo.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you wouldn't be, you know, I didn't even, had been noticing this, but you know, back in the 40s, man, when you worked in the restaurant, you had to go, no kidding, we had to have a health certificate once a month, no kidding. If you worked in the food in the restaurant, you had to go to the health department and be examined once a month. That was back in the early 40s. And I can't believe that we relaxed so much. That's why we're sick. Man, look, people cold. This is unbelievable. I'm going to start like you. I'm going to start looking.
Thanks, Lloyd. Geraldo, go ahead.
I forgot about that, man.
Turn on your mic, Geraldo.
That's the truth. You couldn't work unless you had that.
My concern is actually that balance. You know, we speak about economic development, we speak about the productivity and the funds that we could generate when an establishment is closed on a football game weekend, and how we will not be able to generate that income and taxes and the benefits that would reap. But I'm also concerned as to how much is one life worth? One life that could be your mother, your grandmother, your son, your daughter, your wife, when you're sick and in the hospital with salmonella and your metabolism and your biological system shuts down because you've ate some tainted food. So my concern is, regardless of the revenue of a business could make, a life is worth a lot more than the revenue of a month or 2 months or however long it takes for that establishment to be up to par and serve our community, which we get a lot of lawyers and people from out of town, like this weekend, it's going to be tomorrow, unofficial. A lot of parents and a lot of individuals come from out of town, and they're just waiting for a prime opportunity to go ahead and file lawsuit against public health and against the establishment and anybody else that they could take money out. As an emergency dean on the university campus, I work with Pravina Covenant, Carl Pavilion, and many of the first responders that actually address food poisoning at the hospitals, and they call us about students that are ill because of tainted food. So I'm very highly concerned about the welfare, not only of our students, and those are the people that I see on a regular daily basis, but the fact that I may go out with my wife and kids and die. You know, maybe not me, because I'll eat, you know, I'm old school, you know, if the 30-second rule, if it falls on the floor, you know, kiss it up to God and just pop it in your mouth, and I've never gotten sick, thank God.
All
But
right, let's go to Astrid. You had a question, and then I want to move on
Lloyd's
with
comment
Jim.
makes me think of one of my pet peeves when going to a restaurant. Sick waiters and waitresses with runny nose and coughing in your food and everything else. It's really disgusting. Can't the owners say you can't work in that condition?
Sure they can. Sure they
They
can.
don't.
No, they don't. And I don't want to make excuse for places, but sometimes they need bodies to handle their volume of whatever they have, and those food workers do not get paid sick leave, so they're going to show up to work too.
Maybe we should have paid sick leave.
All right, Pats.
Briefly, I am with Geraldo. If you run an analysis of variance, the top variable should be the individual's health first. So I hope we keep that in mind as we work our way through all of this. My question to you is, okay, I get a green sticker on my restaurant, and you haven't given us the scoring, so I'm assuming with each sticker there's a range of scoring. And my question is, within the range of scoring for a green sticker, could I get a green sticker, but one of my things that is wrong in my restaurant, something that is considered a very high violation?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Then there's something wrong with the system.
We find, let me tell you what the scoring system is. The scoring system right now is based on that 1976 model code that in the book I passed around. Again, it was someone who had 44 columns to fill, and someone figured out how to divide those 44 columns into 100 points. It has no scientific basis. In fact, the FDA dropped that scoring system back in the early 90s. And they have yet to come out with a scoring system associated with that new establishment report. I've been waiting for that. That would really push things along. That was one of the reasons I went to the Conference of Food Protection in Indianapolis, to see how the Conference of Food Protection, which is made up of academic people, food service people, the industry and everyone else, they get together to discuss options and recommendations they give to the FDA. FDA's got to evaluate them, base them on science before they would accept them. Still have no scoring system. So that would be very beneficial to have. But what we do use is we use that old system, and then locally, we have a scoring system that's different than anyone else in the country. We have something called the adjusted score, and what we did is we knew that for item number 3, which is worth 5 points on that 100-point scale, item number 3 deals with temperatures of food. We know you could have a problem with cold holding, cooling of food, cooking of food, reheating of food, hot holding of food. There's many different item number 3s. And so 95% place may have multiple problems. So what we did is we weighted the critical violations an additional 5 points, and also we tried to tackle the repeat violations by highlighting those by an additional 2-point demerit. And so we generate something called an adjusted score. Today, an adjusted score that does not require, well, I should say this. If we were doing an inspection and we saw imminent health hazards, we have the power to shut down the facility and take care of it. If we were doing an inspection and we had an adjusted score of 36 or above, and it could have some of those things that related to consumer health, like temperatures, we are required to correct those on site. So we can throw away the food, we can move the food from the refrigerator to someplace else. So we have solutions to those. Those are corrected on site. So if you look at our inspection reports, you'll see those. Adjusted scores between 35 and 0 are what we would consider that yellow range, reinspection required. And then the other benchmark is that if it's in the negative, then automatic closure, automatic suspension of the license, closure of the facility. And so, yes, you have some of those things that are identified, but we take care of them during our inspection.
Well, I'm a little concerned with the rules and regulations, as most of you know. Oraldo makes some sense, but college students, if they're coming in sick and it's not because of these folks, it's because the university don't check their food over there. So that's out of our realm anyway. But I'd like to know how many people died last year from food poisoning in Champaign County. Anybody? We created a LMRP, which has nothing to do with the Department of Health, but we created a monster when we created that. I don't want to do the same thing with the health department.
I think there's going to be a retort from
Oh,
the side of the
definitely it will
floor.
be. This is a
Geraldo.
study session. And that's what we're here for, to talk and engage in conversation and interact with ideas and philosophies. So I do want to rebuttal, not all students eat in housing or in the residence halls. They eat on campus, they eat at all the local venues in downtown Champaign, in downtown Urbana, and many of the other venues, plus the carryouts as well, too, and the catering services. So it's not just that they eat on campus and, we can't control that. I don't think anybody's keeping count on the specifics, but I'm pretty sure that you could find that out on the web of how many people die locally from food poisoning. I'm pretty sure that's easily Googled. Pardon?
I said, why is death the threshold? I would think
That's the only thing that we would really create attention to, the fact that these places need to be cleaned out and need to be up to par.
May I respond?
All right, let's not get into this back and forth here, okay? It's all right. That's why we're here. I know we like to be back and forth. I would like to know, since Jim doesn't know, how, when, and how many are there inspectors at the university? Do you have any idea, Geraldo? Since you're assistant dean of students, do you have any idea if there are inspectors that are checking
I
food
think they use
service?
the
He
public
says
health
he doesn't know of
department.
any.
Isn't that one of the ones you do, which we should
No,
do
they don't do it at
schools?
all.
No, like Illinois Street Residence Hall, we do not inspect. In fact, we are prohibited from being on university property by the Attorney General. He came out with an opinion in the early 90s that prohibited local health departments from.
Perhaps Quisenberry could shed some light since he works in housing. Quiz?
I will point out that I work for technology in university housing. And in fact, I am participating in this board as an elected representative of the people of District 10. I'm not here representing the University of Illinois. So I don't think I can make any statement as to that function.
Jim,
Can I
you
put
make
some light on this, please?
Can you make an inquiry to the university on that?
Well, I know who I contact, and as I mentioned before, the person that was somewhat my equivalent retired 5 years ago.
Okay, go ahead, Jim. What would you say?
You're talking about illnesses and deaths, and so I thought this might be anticipated. Foodborne illness is a reportable disease to the health department, and so we have a list of class 1, class 2 things that need to be reported to the health department. So I'm going to pass this around because I thought you might have that. We have a category of foodborne and waterborne disease. We have enteric E. coli, which could be 0157H7. We have salmonella. It does cases as well. Both this shows the district and the county, and combined. And like with salmonella, there was always a background number of individuals who are ill. But I'm going to pass this around because you can see the number of illnesses that were at least reported to the health department, both the district and the county, in 2012.
Well, I just want to say again that when we were discussing all this and it came up, the Public Health District and the Board of Health, which is myself and the ones appointed from here, when we were looking at all that, what we were wanting to do is get something in place to let consumers know that there may be a problem or not a problem, and as Jim has said, it may be there today or for 4 hours, but it'll be gone tomorrow. But again, we're limited by staff, we're limited by time, and some of the concerns that you all raise on the inner cities is true, and as John readily stated, I mean, when you're out in the rural area, a lot of those folks are going out to eat. They're not really that alarmed at some of that stuff. They're really not. But we do want to bring some standards in and be fair across the board. And like posting of signs and the choking thing and everything else, you have to get your foot in the door, you have to get established, and then you keep working and improving on it. But you can't go in big and say, well, here's a whole new scheme for you. And Astrid's comment about people being sick and runny noses, you know what? That's management should say, go home, get out of here. But, you know, if I got 3 people working and I got a crowd coming in, what am I gonna do? And if someone gets sick, we're all worried about lawsuits, it seems like. I have yet to sue some of the places I go to and people sneeze on me. There's, you know, things on the, I've complained about carpeting, ceilings. That has nothing to do with the food inspection. Absolutely nothing to do with it. So we need, again, let Jim tell us what he's doing, get this program in place. The smoking deal that everybody talked about earlier, I could take every one of you out in the real world and you'd be amazed at who's smoking and not smoking when they shouldn't be. And there's no way in this big world of ours that there's enough money for police to go out and ticket everybody, nor is Mr. Roberts going to come out when I call him at 2 in the morning when I'm leaving one of my favorite bars to ticket somebody. So when we talk and we all say this, it's good political rhetoric sometimes, but let's be mindful. Let's start simple. Let's start with the basics. Let's get something in place, and then let's start fine-tuning it. But if you go in there with a whole bunch of rules, and we've talked about this in the rural areas, mainly in some of these smaller restaurants, and he's got a lot of miles to cover. Some of these folks are going to be hard-pressed. You know, they're not big city folks. They're mom-and-pop operations, and we want to work with them. We don't want to beat them over the head, and that's what government's all about. It's not go in and say this is the way it's going to be. It's let us help you get to the point you need to be, and we've lost track of that. You know, we always talk about fines, fees, and they're paying for their licenses. I'm all in favor of stiffer fines because that gets your attention. Anytime anybody hits your wallet, it gets your attention. But until we get this all in place, we're all sitting here worried about this and people dying and people this. Well, we've been in this room. I've been here 10 years, and nobody to this day has ever taken this much of an interest to sit down and really discuss it, and I'm glad we are. So, simple steps.
Astrid?
When you say you're not allowed on university property, does that mean all the things like McDonald's and so on campus, that you don't inspect those either?
There was a person who I believe is retired, John Hammer, who believed that we should be there, and so by his invitation, we do regulate and inspect those places. McDonald's was no longer there, but Chick-fil-A and some of the other places, and those are by invitation. If you read the Attorney General's opinion, that we shouldn't be there for that reason either, and so they could tell us to leave tomorrow.
Lorraine?
Okay, Jim, I want to know, we did all this talking, exactly what are you looking for the county board to do?
Well, what I'm looking for you to do is to understand what I'm talking about, and then in the future, because we're going to change, we would like to change the ordinance, that you understand it enough that you could take an informed vote.
Okay, have you got anything in place yet for us, or you
No.
have to come back?
Yeah, I will have to come back.
Okay.
And that's why I gave, let's see if I can find, in your packet information, there was 2 pages, and it talked about inspection notice placards and posting of inspection notice. It talked about where we would post these placards.
It's page 25.
So we talk about, you know, posted facing outward on the front of the door. The discretion may have to be given to the inspector to decide where to put this, given there's so many variables, you know, of what to do, and then have consequences associated with not doing this.
Quiz?
Did you get all the way through your presentation yet, Jim?
No.
I would really like to see the rest of your presentation,
Okay.
so if we could get there, then maybe we can
That'd be
ask-
fine.
ask
Good
some more
idea. Go ahead, Jim.
questions.
Continue on.
Okay.
please.
Let's see, where am I? Yeah, I hit the wrong button, hold on. No, I only went to the top here. I have these requirements here. The object is to be accessible to the public. I want people to see this stuff so they can find the information before they dine, okay? Sometimes we have things posted behind the counter, in the kitchen, any other place, but I want it to be very accessible. That's the object of this. I have been informing operators of, well, my staff has been informing operators of these proposed on-site posting during our routine inspections that we have been doing in both the district and the county. And I also included a copy of the county newsletter. Once a year, we have a county newsletter. It goes out to the county establishments when they renew their permits in November, and then the district does it in April. So they have some information. And I also included a sheet that talked about comments from the field. I've asked my staff, every staff meeting, tell me what people are saying about this. And so when they go over it, they've collected these comments, and these have been the general comments, and I thought you should see them. And the one is, if you put it up, she'll rip it down. It doesn't matter who comes in. She was not going to put it up. It's a ploy to destroy small businesses, one of your county establishments. And so this is the type of comments that we're getting, so these are the things that we need to address. Again, what I'm going to ask you to do is change the health ordinance so that we can do this. There should be enforcement consequences. And again, you asked about what I'm asking. I'll eventually ask for board's approval on this. The university, I have no idea.
Jim, when you're talking about enforcement, are you talking about fines as part of the enforcement program?
I don't have that right now, but that could be a possibility, yes.
Okay, you want to add that in with your, when you come back, if you feel the
Yeah,
fines.
well, I think what I need to do is go to the state's attorney and the district attorney, the district's attorney, and see what they can come up with, you know. I mean, we've talked about fines, we've talked about progressive enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, they used to close your place up if it wasn't kept up sanitary. You'd be closed until you got it clean. And that's what I want to get my boy here. Maybe that's the reason we wasn't sick back there then.
Thank you.
Now, wait a minute, go to the hospital and I'm telling you, you cry. Every day, the parking lot in the hospital is full. Something is wrong with us. And it didn't used to be that way. And they can build a established building now because they know to go fill it up. So something is going on. There's too many sick folks, and we need to do something about it, you know.
All right, what I wanted, before I talk, this was posting on site. And so what I did is I included in your packet, the last inspection for the county nursing home. I thought you'd be interested in that. And so that's in your packet. And then also, I have version 6 of that green sheet that would be in general compliance. I'm going to pass this out, and this is using that inspection, so you could see what we would require to be posted in the front door of the county nursing home. So I'm going to pass that.
I do have a question about this report. Can you explain what circumstances allows you to be more than 100% out of compliance?
The enforcement section that is adopted by the boards, again, allows an adjusted score of 36% or above to be in general compliance where reinspection is not required.
But how do you get above 100% out of compliance? Either you're out of compliance or you're...
You don't.
Okay. Well, it says here 120%, 140%.
I'll have to come back to that. You're looking at the website thing. I'll explain that.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm trying to show you is the regular inspection report that was done on 12/3. And I highlighted some areas, and these are those ones related to consumer health, inadequate time and temperature, allowing contamination by hands. There was 3 of those. And so I made a more updated version of that green sheet. You know, I had all the scratch on there from our study session and points. And so, Stan, this is the latest version of what we're looking at. And it talks about whether it's a routine inspection or reinspection, because I had staff concerned about that, and, I don't, anyway, this is what it would look like. COS on here refers to corrected on site. They were corrected during the inspection, and none of these were repeats at that time. So does this give good information for a consumer? Question.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'll just ask it out loud.
That's what it used to look like. This, yeah.
Yeah, you know, before even 1976, they used to have a,
Basic right here.
they used to have a simpler kind of inspection, right?
Exactly.
Next part, and this is going to happen whether we post this on site or not, is the online part. And it says publicizing inspections at the top, and it's cut off, but it says online. It's going to be at the CUPHD website. There's going to be explanations, as you would see other people's websites. It's similar to other sites that you'd be able to click and view individual inspection reports, the same report that's issued to the operator. So it's not been sanitized in any way or redone. You'll be also subscribed to an email alert, so if you have a kid in school and you want to know how that school did, as soon as that inspection is uploaded to the server, you'll be able to be sent an email alert regarding that. And I listen to people, and one of the common things from operators, for example, is that an inspection is a snapshot in time. It may not reflect how well I was yesterday or how well I was doing tomorrow. So it's a snapshot in time. So I think I've solved that. And it's gonna be on the website. It's gonna be solved in 3 different ways. And that's the sheet you were referring to before. That's this one here. It's got some things circled on it because I have errors yet. But this would summarize what are the top 5 consumer health violations over the routine inspections. What are the top 5 violations of any kind? Because the inspections we do are compliance inspections. So the top 5 violations that you might find are, I tell you, they're probably going to be floors, walls, and ceilings type things, but they don't have an impact on consumer health like those other things. And so when you looked at that cover sheet and you had something greater than 100%, what that told me, it should be actually 140%, and that's one of the errors, and that's why it's not released yet. I have some calculation errors. That meant out of the 5 routine inspections done at the county nursing home, there were 7 violations associated with whatever that blank thing is, which actually is preventing contamination by hands. So they have more than 1 on each inspection. That's why it's over 140%. And then 2, the third way of summarizing it is to summarize in graph form to show people a track record, a performance record over time about how we're doing in total compliance, which would be the top line, and it's in the green line. Repeat violations. I'd like to reduce repeat violations as well. And so this would highlight the repeat violations, and then finally those consumer health red flag violations would be the bottom line. So you can see how the county nursing home has performed over its last 5 inspections. So that's what would be on site then. I mean, on the website. And I think now that I'm done.
Not a question, but I guess a general comment, maybe a little bit of guidance. I mean, listening to all this, I guess the first thing I should say is obviously restaurant inspections are critical. There are real risks associated with people getting sick. If there are dangerous conditions in a restaurant, you know, they need to be dealt with the way you're dealing with them now, which is they fix them before the inspector leaves, or they're shut down. I mean, their walk-in cooler doesn't work, they don't have running water, I mean, this type of thing.
I mean, the health hazards.
You can't operate a restaurant, and everybody understands that. I mean, another reason they're important is to level the playing field. I mean, you don't want a conscientious restaurant owner out there, you know, being undercut by an unscrupulous restaurant owner. And so I think, you know, the overall idea of restaurant inspections, I'm certainly in favor of. I mean, it's clearly a compelling public good, and I don't think there's much dispute about that. I do have some serious issues with the sort of the yellow sign approach that we're talking about. And I'll just try to run through those, and maybe we can address those in the future, or maybe we'll just have to agree to disagree. I mean, the percentage of people who get sick, you know, John said how many people die of food poisoning. Well, not that many people die of food poisoning, you know, not that many people get sick. You know, thankfully, the percentage of people who get sick in restaurants is very low. I still
think there's considerable evidence that the safest place to eat is a restaurant kitchen. I mean, if you've ever inspected anybody's home kitchen, I mean, I don't want to go into what most home kitchens are like, but they would not pass your inspection. They'd probably end up with a red sign. And of course, the vast majority of meals that are consumed in this community are consumed in uninspected, relatively unsanitary home kitchens operated by non-professionals. So, I mean, I think we have to keep a sense of perspective there. Going back and looking on the website at some of the failed reports, and there are a lot of them, you know, a lot of these issues are, I want to say, relatively minor. And I'm not saying they're unimportant, but, you know, they add up. And in any, you know, busy operation, you know, depending on what day you inspect them, you know, you're going to find some things. My concern is that the percentage of a bad outcome eating in a restaurant is very low. The difference in the percentage of a bad outcome eating in a restaurant that's got a green sign versus eating in a restaurant with a yellow sign is essentially zero. And what Josh said, you know, I wouldn't even go into a restaurant that had a yellow sign, and maybe even if it was a green sign with some negative marks. I mean, I'm coming from the other end. If they're open, I'll eat there, because I feel like if they didn't meet the minimum standards, they wouldn't be open. So I'm concerned that, you know, Jim, you asked, you know, what does this tell, what information does this give to the consumer? Is this a good indication for the consumer? And I would argue that it's not. I would argue that it means very little to the consumer in terms of making an informed decision. You know, at the cleanest, safest restaurant in town that's never had a demerit on their health inspection, all it takes is one bad piece of shellfish and you're going to get sick. And you can eat in a hellhole for years and get lucky. So I guess if we're trying to inform people about, you know, your likelihood of getting sick eating at this restaurant, it just doesn't seem like that's particularly significant. Another issue I have is that random inspections are random. I mean, a conscientious restaurant, you know, is going to get unlucky and score a 49, and a unscrupulous restaurant's going to get lucky and score a 51. And having an arbitrary line where you either get the green sign that says we're great or the yellow sign that says don't eat here seems somewhat random, and it's going to depend on the day they were inspected. And, you know, if they were there on the day that the server happened to have Astrid's runny nose, you know, it's a problem. I guess getting into a more serious issue, I think this is sort of a general philosophy about regulation. If dangerous conditions need to be remedied immediately or they need to be closed. But if the goal is compliance over time with these relatively minor violations, that seems like something that's going to get solved more effectively if they're working with your department more collaboratively as opposed to adversarially. And my concern, I guess, and I'm not implying by any means that your staff would bend the rules, but if it turns out that the yellow sign is indeed a significant detriment to that restaurant doing business, you come in and do an inspection, and you can give them whatever your numbers are, 34 and they're going to get a yellow sign, or 36 and they're not. There's going to be a lot of pressure on that inspector to look the other way on the fact that you know, temperature was off by a degree, or that sink dripped a little bit, or that, you know, that indirect vent below the janitor sink wasn't quite short enough. And I guess my concern is if we don't want to create a situation where there's either a disincentive for the inspector to note non-critical violations, or an incentive for the restaurant owner to, you know, be adversarial, instead of trying to hide things from the inspector, you know, even more than they probably do already, to try to avoid getting that yellow sign. We talked about, somebody mentioned a salmonella outbreak at one of the fast food restaurants. You know, health inspections aren't going to find that, right? I mean, that's a supply chain problem. You've got some upstream produce vendor that's not, you know, that's getting from an unscrupulous farmer, or just got unlucky, got some contamination in the product. And again, if somebody sees that green sign and walks in there and gets that bad oyster, or gets those bad what was it? It was sprouts, right? Bad bean sprouts. You know, they're going to get sick, and I think that kind of undermines their belief in the whole process. And I guess, so, I mean, what would I do instead? You know, I don't know. I'm making a lot of criticism here, not offering much in the way of solutions, I recognize. But, I mean, I guess my concern is just that this yellow sign seems it's binary. You know, you're either good or you're bad, and you're good or you're bad based on something that could be somewhat arbitrary, something that could be somewhat random. I guess philosophically, I feel like, you know, the restaurants where you go in, if you find something seriously wrong, they fix it or you close them. Other than that, you know, if things are marginal, if they seem to have a lot of issues, seems like those are the ones you go back to more often. And the odds are, if you go back to them a couple more times, they're either going to have cleaned up their act somewhat, or they're probably going to get closed. And I guess I feel like the ones that, you know, as you inspect are generally in compliance. I like the idea of making all the information available on the website. I think that's fine, because there you're really giving people a lot of information, right? They can look at all the violations. They can decide for themselves whether, you know, this looked like a place was having one bad day, or this is a place that every time they get inspected, they got a laundry list of violations. Yeah, I'm not going to eat there. But I'm concerned about this idea of, you know, we found, you know, 20 things wrong instead of 19. You get the yellow sign, and I'm not really comfortable with that approach yet. So when you come back, I guess that's the perspective I'm going to need to be dissuaded from.
Just a quick thing on that, Chris, is when we discussed all this, we looked at other places that are doing this, and Jim can jump in here, and some of the talk was, like in Danville and other areas, they go by a star rating. You get a 3, a 4, and then that doesn't change until the next 6 months or whatever the case may be. I somewhat agree with you, but I'm a firm believer that when we talked about these signs, we thought that the yellow sign doesn't mean it's bad, and like you said, I'm still going to walk in there because there's only certain restaurants I can go to in my community. But if there's a red sign, it's closed. We don't want to do that because we are taking away revenue, and I'd much rather work with the people and correct it. And Jim can tell you there's restaurants that they can go in and you know, they don't have the time to inspect all that often. And yes, there are things wrong in restaurants, and there's things that I think are wrong, but that's neither here nor there. But by giving that yellow sign and he loses a little business or people have a second thought, I think that's a good thing, because when you're walking in there, you're aware that this restaurant has had some problems. And that owner should strive to make those things right and correct those things as time goes on to keep his business going. But if you close them right away, I think closing a place is going to send a message, it's really bad. You know, so the green is you're in compliance. And we're trying to get everybody so that there are some set standards that we can all live with. But the star system, I was sort of in favor of that at first until I heard all the arguments, and Jim was right. That thing's up there, you got 5 stars. Tomorrow, you could eat some bad hamburger or whatever. And his quote, which really makes sense, when you look at this, it's dated. It's a snapshot in time. And that owner, the next time we go in there, or they go in there, I like to take credit, he's going to say, I don't want another yellow sign because I lost some customers. They looked at that and they turned around and walked away. But the other thing, our biggest thing is, where are we going to put them so people even see them? You know, and that's why we're trying to get an ordinance change and some teeth and stuff, because most of them, they could stick them behind the counter, they could stick them in the kitchen, they could stick them in a closet. So we're trying to get it all worked out, and some of your comments, they've all been taken, and I mean, we've got a lady that rides with me that used to work for the CDC, and believe you me, for 2 hours during that drive while I'm driving 20 miles per hour, I've heard a lot of stories.
Your points are really well taken, Chris. I agree for the most part with some of your concerns. I don't like arbitrary either. I also do have concerns that if it's, you know, 3 or 4, didn't sweep this, didn't wipe that, or whatever violations knock somebody out, as opposed to things like temperatures and real public health ideas. But I think that the public has a right to know, especially about repeat failures, and since we are talking about snapshots here, I think, you know, the yellow thing, you know, for one thing, there are things that I don't want to eat that aren't going to make me sick, okay? For one thing, urine is sterile, okay? And I've worked enough in restaurants, and I worked in Timponi's, which is a fantastic one, and, you know, at Pink House, which was questionable at times, but there's always going to be violations and failures. But I think that you can tell by a business by how it's run, like people that really mean to have a clean and really take it serious. I mean, at Champaign, we took it very serious, and the whole staff did. And those are gonna be places that are gonna have green, maybe have one or two knocks. That's why I worry more about a green with one or two knocks than a yellow. Because I'm concerned about people seeing that, oh, well, they failed one or two things. Well, of course, the place is gonna get hit once or twice. I'm more concerned about people seeing this on a green and not coming in, because a lot of people are gonna be that way, than a yellow. And I think a yellow should be more tied to repeat violations, refusal to clean things up, and an obvious denial of the staff to their responsibilities to provide clean food. So your points are taken, and again, we do need to find a happy medium, I think.
So first a comment, and then since this is a study session, I'm going to ask two questions. The comment is, as I was doing some research and reading the online reports on inspections that have been put up there by an independent group, I noticed that there were some repeat offenders who were, skating on the edge of the bad things, but never really bad. But if you looked at their not bad things, the same problems were there 6 months apart, 12 months apart. The edge, the seal on the cooler is rotted out, so it's not sealing properly. Well, that's not enough to close you down, but, a year later, when you're up for something else on the big list, and that's still down there, we're not getting traction. We're not dealing with the things that may contribute to a public health issue. I guess my two questions, and I'm looking for short answers, if there is such a thing, is a little bit of a reminder as to how we ended up with a county board of health and a CU board of health or public health district. Just a recap, and then that leads to the question of how does our change of legislation for the county, which I assume applies to the county board of health, trickle down or react or relate to the CU public health district? So who's going to take a shot at those?
Being here when it happened, I can comment on why we have 3 different health departments. When the county health department was proposed, there was a great outcry and complaint from the residents of the rural part of the county. They did not want a health department. They were yelling about, we won't be able to have our church socials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It took a lot of political wrestling to get that passed. And I suspect when Champaign and Urbana had separate health departments, there may have been something to do with that. But the question I really want to answer is, how do you get your statistics on infections? Now, salmonella, how many people go out, eat, get a case of diarrhea and whatnot, and never report it? So how these statistics upon which this stuff is based are of, shall we say, limited reliability, or are they?
It's true. I mean, foodborne illness is an underreported illness, and, it's said that most people get sick from their home kitchens, but no one's going to call the health department on Right. And so, the same food safety hazards exist, whether it's at a home kitchen or in a restaurant, and if they're not eliminated, reduced, or prevented, someone's going to get sick. I don't recall nationwide. I think it's a few million people that become sick each year, and about 3,000 deaths across the country they estimate on foodborne illness. But reporting foodborne illness is just the tip of the iceberg, and that's reported to the health department, though.
Just one part of response to your question. I believe the goal is that we, as much as possible, are adopting consistent standards for both CUPHD and the county board. Is that part of the last part of your question?
Well, I guess if we eventually take something up with our legislation and adjust our ordinance, does that have any effect on CU Public Health
No.
District?
No.
They're going to do what they,
But the goal is.
hopefully in cooperation, they're going to do the same
Because we
thing.
have one agency that's managing for both districts, for both the CUPHD and the County Board of Health, is all managed by one agency because the County Board of Health contracts with CUPHD to manage County Board of Health responsibilities. And so I think the goal and part of the reason for the study session is to flush out as much as possible with the hope that you and the CUPHD board will adopt the same guidelines.
Okay, I assume CU Health District is the limits of the cities, Champaign and Urbana?
Townships, City of Champaign
They're
Township,
the
Cunningham Township.
Township as well?
Right,
Okay.
and the district started in 1937, and the county health department in about 1998.
So Savoy isn't covered?
It's in the county.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Just to clarify, Ralph was absolutely right, but overwhelmingly, the rural area voted the health district down. They absolutely didn't want it. But unfortunately, that isn't all that got a vote, because even the folks in the county, in the villages, or in the cities, are in the county. And so the folks, the vote within the two municipalities, Champaign and Urbana, caused it to happen. It wasn't the folks in the rural area, but that's neither here nor there at this time. It's here, and we need to deal with it.
Okay, as I listen to all of very good comments and suggestions, it comes to mind that this whole approach is a negative approach. And the negative approach clearly isn't working because, as James mentioned, if you go back and read the CU Access articles, you see a lot of this flushed out. So my curiosity, if you look at psychological studies on how you're going to change human behavior, you do a much better job and turning it around that it's a positive approach rather than a negative approach. And I'm not hearing any of that in this conversation. So my macro question is, and I didn't do that kind of research before I came tonight, and I can do more on and I've been Googling different health departments to see what I could find, is to find some models across the country where they have shifted to that kind of approach and talk to those folks in those various cities or counties, whatever, to find out what kind of change that has implemented for them and what length of time they have shifted to another way of getting restaurants to comply. Because everything I'm hearing is, if we do this or that, it will close them down or that. Why don't we shift it that you get to stay open because you are really, you are hitting a home run every single time. And that is the emphasis. And it isn't just, the seal on a refrigerator, it's the cockroach walking across your plate. And, you go in to use the bathrooms and they haven't been taken care of for years, and setting a whole change of environment within our county on how we view this and move these restaurant owners along with this.
Jim, aren't you using the California model?
Well, this was, the color system was from like Sacramento County,
Sacramento.
and
They're using
if you,
an alphabet system also in Southern California.
everyone uses everything else, and that was part of the reason for the
ABC.
review article, is that everyone uses everything. There's no consistency. Again, if the FDA would come through with a model way of doing this, we would have maybe start having some consistency. And the only model I ever heard that's positive would be to charge them like $3,000 for the permit and then renew some of their money if they performed well.
And if I may, Al, we did look at a lot of models, Patsy, when we discussed this, and there was stuff in the county newspaper that we get that I passed on to Jim and Julie, and that's what got this going. But again, we did all that, and then we bring it forward and we sort of rehash it. But as far as restrooms and some of the stuff you're talking, that's more of a courtesy type thing. They're more interested in what goes on in the kitchen, right, Jim?
Right. Our rules and regulations are really when that we go past that counter or the back door. So Stan likes to complain about the tear in the carpet, in the dining room floor. I mean, if I were to cite a rule, it's a 1-point violation type thing, you know? Or, yes, I want soap and towels in the public restroom, but if, you know, if their mirror is not clean, that doesn't cut it.
John?
I'd like to ask Jim if, other than the restaurants in the county, do you do the gas stations that sell food, like Casey's and?
Yes, yes,
And schools?
yes.
So I'm kind of concerned about, and agree with Chris, I'm a little nervous about the yellow. If the yellow sheet was really there for a minor, I don't know what to call a minor problem, that would maybe deter people or scare people that we really didn't need to do. It almost looks like if you're green, there shouldn't be any marks on it, and maybe forget the yellow and go to red.
Right, and that could be like the traditional model that was option number one. If they're open, that means that they were in good standing. You know, and if they're bad, the health department closed them. How do you get this yellow and green is based on the adjusted score. And so you figure out the score, and if it's 36 and above, you have green. If it's below, you get the yellow. And so it is based on the rating score based in the 1976 code, and then it goes back and looks at the critical violation and weights each one of those for additional 5 points. The score starts plummeting. And if you had repeats, you're minus 2 points, just like the nursing home had. So that score starts plummeting. And so you have to start to not manage your facility, both from a illness perspective or from a maintenance perspective, to get that lower score. And if you remember, in the county, we had 433 routine inspections last year, and we had 14 re-inspections. So it's not a lot of facilities. Right.
Okay, I think we've satisfied tonight. Jim, thank you very much. I know you put a lot of work into this thing, and you could probably go on for another hour and a half if we let you. But I think at this point, we've threshed this out. We have some differing of opinions, but I think maybe we, if you want to bring back an ordinance change or something to us, maybe we can put some input into, if anybody wants to talk to Jim, they can call him over at the health department and make suggestions or send him an email, and we'll see where we can go with this, okay? I'd like to